Welcome to Vampires and Mermaids. I'm Erin.
I'm Risha.
And the delightful crunches at the beginning were brought to you by McDonald's. Just kidding, they're not sponsored. Risha got it for us.
Yeah.
But
I had to pay.
We are back once again. We recorded all of the previous episodes on one day. So for our listeners, it hasn't been that long, but for us, it's been a hot minute since we recorded.
Yeah.
So what are we starting off? I believe we pulled Decapitation.
We did, and I will talk about that.
Excellent.
Yes,
I'm going to mute myself so I can continue to crunch my crunchy nugs, but I will hop in still.
Please do.
It's just so you don't get more of the crunches
I don't
throughout.
want to be lonely.
Now tell me of the decapitation.
Okay.
Oh, actually, tangent.
Yes,
Sorry,
please.
I'm already
No,
interrupting
please
you.
do.
My cat Mia, my indoor kitty, started us off with decapitation this week by leaving my husband a decapitated mouse head at the bottom of our stairs.
Wow.
He was not amused. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, you get it, girl. Like, listen, if they're in our house, which we don't have a lot, but like some explore our basement where like they come up the sump drain, I think. Anyway, we live in the country. It happens. I'd rather find him dead than find him alive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Philip was very unhappy, and I was like, "Good job, kitty cat." Oh, gesundheit.
Thank you.
Okay,
Nice.
now I will, with a single crunch, I will mute myself.
Good job. Yes, we will talk about decapitation because it was pulled out of the hat box. So in Eastern European folklore, decapitation is believed to be the most effective way to destroy a vampire. And the thought was that the head removed would prevent the head itself from directing the corpse. So it can't move the corpse without the head.
Billy from Hocus Pocus has taught me otherwise.
Right. And I also think about like Drunken Boy. We had that episode and the head just was on its own. Just have at it.
And he was a pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm. This is Eastern European. So a little different.
Kind of Russia.
Yeah, closer to that. Russia, Prussia, Poland. And so it came from an ancient idea that the vampire needs both the head and the heart to regenerate. So the head can move it around and do whatever it needs to do, and the heart is the thing that keeps it going and pumps it through. And in this tradition, in Eastern Europe, people like to watch the decapitation of vampires or suspected vampires. And so onlookers were cautioned to keep their distance so that blood that was splashed from a vampire would not cause disease. Which, like, I think it's porphyria is the rare genetic blood disease or something that people think is what the origin of a lot of vampire lore comes from, but that it's genetic, so that's not the disease they thought would come from it. I'm guessing it was plague.
Right. I mean, there are a bunch of bloodborne pathogens,
Right.
so that makes sense. And plague's body fluid, right?
I think so.
Ooh, maybe I shouldn't say that so boldly.
I don't know.
I want to say it's through because it's spread by rat fecal matter.
Oh,
It's not necessarily body fluid.
I thought it was spread by the flea that got onto the rat.
Oh, is that it? Mm-hmm. Well, let's Google. So
Woo, we're good at
maybe
that.
I'm spewing some shit.
And it could be different plagues, too.
Well,
you know.
and that's the other thing, too,
Yeah.
is they might have been thinking the plague and referring to like 10 different things.
Right.
Bite of an infected flea, handling infected animals, inhaling droplets.
Ew.
So both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of the above?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fluids and fleas.
Ew.
All bad.
Fluids and fleas. This sounds like a really gross grunge metal band. In the 10th and 11th century, there's a burial ground in, it's either Kelikovis or Selikovis. It's near Prague. People rediscovered it in 1966, like hundreds of years after. And this is pretty much a vampire burial ground.
What? Mm-hmm. They have that?
Yeah.
Let's get famous enough so we can go.
That would be wonderful. An interesting thing about this is that all of the bodies, every single one of them had heads decapitated. A lot of them had the head still there, but they were removed from the body.
How close to the body were they? Like, were they in the same shroud?
Same grave, yep.
See,
same
that
area.
seems problematic. Like, we got separate that shit.
So a lot of them usually would put the head underneath their butt or behind their knees.
I can get behind that.
So it was in a place that if they were to start trying to move around, it would be hard for them to get the head back up and around.
I feel like if you're going to do the damn thing, though,
Just separate it.
Stick it in a separate hole.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no.
Put them somewhere else or...
Now I can only think of put that thing back where it came from, or so help me.
Or at least like burn it, or I don't know, like do an extra. If you're already taking the time to cut the head off, do an extra step.
Well, that's exhausting already.
Like you're already cutting a head off someone who's supposedly a vampire. Like really? You swap heads into a different body burial site? Like I don't know.
Make a Frankenstein vampire.
I mean, hopefully they wouldn't want someone else's. Oh, yeah, I guess that could be problematic, too.
But the other things about these bodies that are interesting is that a lot of them were weighed down so that they wouldn't be able to move.
Okay.
There was usually a nail driven through their decapitated temple, like their head, the temple in their head.
Okay, we're getting to the extra steps. I like it.
There were usually stakes through the heart, classic. There was still, a lot of them had the sickle over the neck, even though the head was already removed to prevent them from getting up, I guess.
Again, I'm liking it. I'm liking the extra steps.
This one I have never heard of, so this is weird, and I would like to know more. If anybody knows, please tell me. I just found out you can comment on Spotify, so if you're listening on Spotify, you can comment right on us.
Yeah, you can also email us vampsandmers with the and spelled out at gmail.com.
Yeah.
Or DM us on Instagram at vampsandmers with the and sign on Instagram.
Root-a-toot-toot.
So what do you want to learn more about?
So I want to learn more about why they would have a triangular padlock on their foot to prevent returning from the dead.
Huh. That's new.
Mm-hmm. I could understand triangular possibly being a call to, triune God, like that, but I don't know.
On a single foot?
Mm-hmm.
See, again, I'm like, shackle this bitch if it comes back. Like, put it on both, you know? Like, tie the shoelaces together. I don't know. Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Also, that just seems like a pain to make.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe if you just get 3 little...
I guess the mechanism would be the same.
Yeah. But I thought that was odd. Something that we have talked about is horses.
Woo!
And in this is an example of a graveyard cemetery where they would do that practice, where they would have a horse, a white horse with a boy dressed in white, go through the graveyard, and if the horse stopped, it was a vampire.
Go listen to that episode if you haven't already.
It's just horses.
I re-listened to it, and it still makes me laugh.
I do. Do you have a short one or a long one today?
It's like medium.
Medium
to slightly long.
Because I could go into something a little, like, adjacent.
Totally up to you, girl.
So I watched the Underworld movie like a couple months ago, so it's a little fuzzy now.
That's fine.
But there is a kind of significant decapitation thing that happens in it. So do you know anything about Underworld?
Nope.
Okay.
I think you gave me a very brief description once, but my brain has already...
Totally fair.
Yeah.
I watched it a couple months ago, and before that it had been like 20 years.
Fair.
Underworld is a series of films that have vampires and a type of werewolf that are called lycans, which come from lycanthrope or lycanthropy. The root word. Da, da, da. The first film was released in 2003, and that's the one I'm going to talk about. And it is very much a early 2000s action thriller movie.
Is this like actual people or is this cartoon?
Actual people.
Okay.
It's live action. Yep.
Excellent.
Yep. So the kind of premise of this world is that werewolves and vampires aren't magic. It's not magical or anything like that. They originated from a virus, ancient virus that, like, they actually called it a plague too, that wiped out a whole, like, city, town area. And there was one guy that lived.
Ooh.
And he was Corvinus. That was his name. Somehow, his body mutated the virus, and he became immortal.
I mean, really, he was probably just the initial...
Carrier?
Yeah, because sometimes the initial carrier doesn't get the symptoms, and they pass it along, but then they're immune. So he was probably really just the initial carrier.
It could be. Well, in their lore, he mutated the virus to become immortal.
Well, that's a little more intense.
And then he had 3 kids.
With who? Everyone else is dead. I guess
Well,
you can
walked.
move, I guess. Yeah, I suppose. There's probably a horse around or something. Not that he fucked the horse. He probably rode the horse to a neighboring town. I'm going to be done now. I should get more nuggets, so I shut the hell up.
No, that was wonderful. So he had 3 kids, and 2 of them were bitten by animals. One was bitten by a bat, and the other one was bitten by a wolf. And so the one that was bitten by the bat had
rabies.
Well,
but
maybe,
but not the point. Okay.
They all 3 of the kids carry the mutated gene.
Sure.
And the one that got bitten by the bat got something that turned them into the vampire, which is immortal.
Nice little Spider-Man action going on here.
And then the other one that got bit by a wolf became the lichen, who became the immortal lichen.
All right, I'm catching up.
And then the other one that didn't get bit stayed human.
Suck.
And just died.
Oh.
But their descendants carried the gene throughout life.
Gotcha.
But they're still just human. They're mortal humans.
Okay.
And so you go to this lair, this coven of vampires that they're super rich, but they're all super pale and leathery and stuff. And the main character gal, Celine, I think is how you say it. I've forgotten already. But she's played by Kate Beckinsale. And her job in the coven is to kill lichens. So there's a huge war.
Oh, at some point the siblings turn. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so that's her whole job, is to kill lichens. And they tend to be the more grungy, on the street and
sure.
And gritty, guys. There's not a lot of female lichens that I saw. But so she's going out. She's going to kill lichens, and she finds out that they are going after this human guy named Michael Corvin, and she is attracted to this man.
Oh no.
And so she's trying to save him, but he gets bitten by a lichen and he gets turned into a lichen. And so now she's got to decide, is she going to save him, which would be going against her whole thing that she's doing and her people, or is she going to kill them like she's supposed to?
We got a little bit of Romeo and Juliet vibes.
Totally Romeo and Juliet.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because you find out that they were going after him because he's one of the descendants that were the human that has the mutated gene.
Okay.
And they were trying to mix the vampire and lichen
no, don't do that.
So he became a hybrid eventually in the show. And so he's part vampire, part lichen. He's a whole mix.
Oh boy.
Which is super strong and everything. And because of this, because all this stuff is happening, she goes back into her coven and woke up the big elder guy. Who is asleep, and he is supposed to be sleeping for another couple centuries or so.
Oh boy, okay.
There's another elder that was supposed to be woken up before him. But she woke him up and gets in trouble.
Yeah.
But not too bad in trouble because he's also her sire, and she's his favorite daughter.
Sure.
And her whole connection to him is that lichens killed her family, and then he changed her.
Okay.
You find out he killed her family and changed her.
Oh boy.
I know, right?
Family eliminator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But still, she has this connection to him. They've had centuries of being together and trusting and loyalty and all that jazz. And then there's a huge battle that happens between the lichens and the vampires and this hybrid that's here. And the big sire guy, the elder, is really not okay with the hybrid. He's this is an abomination. This is bad.
Just funny because they're all mutants, but yeah,
right.
Fair enough though. I can see it.
And his whole thing too, he had a daughter who wanted to marry a lichen early on.
So this is repeating itself a little bit.
And so she then saves Michael Corvin from him with a sword, which she slices diagonally through his head. So there's
cool.
kind of the
decapitation adjacent.
2/3, a third decapitated, through his head.
Would he be allowed to join the headless hunt in Harry Potter? Excuse me.
No, because he's not severed at the neck.
But he could do a headless, because nearly headless Nick wasn't allowed to.
Because he couldn't remove it fully.
Right. But he could, and they said it's because he couldn't do like
the games.
Yeah, like juggling. But this guy could technically do like headless juggling.
It'd be like
were both
half
eyes
a ball?
cut off?
No.
Oh.
It was like diagonal.
Then I feel like he probably wouldn't be allowed
right?
to, because like you wouldn't. You'd have one eye on each, so I feel like that wouldn't be fair.
I feel like his mouth would still mostly be attached too. Yeah.
Okay, so he would not be allowed to join the headless hunt.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I've been sitting on Underworld for like months now because I was gonna do it, but I felt like I didn't have enough to really
but that's a perfect tangent.
Yeah.
Oh, how fun. Okay, so I'm gonna take you on a journey, and that journey is through my mind.
Yay.
Like right after, it might have even been before we recorded last time, or like very shortly after. So this was like a month ago. I was listening to My Favorite Murder, one of my favorite podcasts, while I was grooming dogs, which I do all day. So I listened to a plethora of podcasts and audiobooks, and they were talking about the third man syndrome, which I'll give you like a little tiny tidbit of because it's interesting, but like honestly, just go listen to Karen and Georgia on My Favorite Murder talk about it. Third man syndrome is essentially when some people get in like a high stakes environment, and I mean like life threatening, like you are about to fucking die, and they'll like hear another person talk to them.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's like not just like in your head or like you're talking to yourself, like you hear another person, and it originated, again, go listen to them, but SparkNotes version, because there were these like Arctic researchers who got stranded, and there were actually 3 guys, and they ended up trekking like really far to get to safety, and they barely made it, and they're like starving and freezing and dehydrated, and they all swore there was a 4th person with them like when they got there, and they like all saw him and were hearing from him, but like he never existed, like he wasn't on any rosters, and like as they regained sanity, they're like, yeah, he was never around. And it got dubbed the third man syndrome, not the fourth man syndrome, because some poet wrote about it and was like, that doesn't sound good. We're going to make it the third man syndrome.
Even numbers aren't good.
Right, which I think is hilarious. So Karen and Georgia were talking about that, and they talked about a couple examples, like one being a guy who almost died in 9/11, which was a terrorist attack for any of our non-U.S. listeners that happened in 2001. Big bad. But there was a survivor giving his examples and talking about how he heard this voice. And then they talked about a diver who did research and how she had this experience. So she was diving, and I think her name was Stephanie, in Mermaid's Lair Cave. And so I immediately wrote it down and was like, I want to cover this. So her story, because this is pertinent to this, I'll tell you a little bit about hers. Her husband had died 3 weeks earlier. They used to dive together. And on a dive, he didn't like get back in time and he passed. Tragic. So this was her first dive back alone, only 3 weeks after he had passed, because she literally was like, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. And she was a researcher, and I believe she was studying something along the lines of like global warming, because she was going into these caves to find evidence that they used to be above land. So she was taking like soil samples and stuff.
Cool.
Super neat. And so she went into the Mermaid's Lair, which is like a very treacherous, lots of dead ends, very curvy, wild dive. Like you have to be super advanced. And she gets to where she needs to be. She gets her samples. She took a guide rope with her, which is like a bright white rope that you can follow back out. Well, while she was taking the samples, she let it go. And apparently it was always her husband's job to hold on to it. So she kind of like, well, that's not my job. You know, you don't subconsciously, it's not muscle memory. I know.
Oh, no.
So she realizes it, and she can't find the rope, and she's freaking out, and she looks at her tank. She has like 5 minutes of oxygen left. And she hears her husband's voice be like, you need to calm. She starts freaking out. And she hears her husband's voice being like, you need to calm down. You can get out of this. And she like calmed down enough that she was able to like do some exploring, look around, see the rope, and make her way out. Now, they go on to discuss on the podcast whether or not there are like science-based reasons for this, if it's like a pre-evolutionary side of our brain kicking in for survival, whether it's a spiritual aspect as far as God goes. That's not what this podcast's about. I heard right. Mermaid's Lair Cave. So I wrote it down. Oh gosh, later last week, I was like, all right, we're going to research the Mermaid's Lair. Hell yeah. Guess what? I couldn't find anything except that specific story. And I looked. Couldn't find where it was. Couldn't find any information about it. Just her story. What? I know. So I think, well, I found a different cave called Mermaid's Cave. Now, this is mostly above ground. So I wrote a little bit about that. And then I'll have a little bit of a tangent again here in a second.
Okay.
So the Mermaid's Cave I chose to write about, because there are a bunch of different ones, is a hidden destination on Oahu, one of the Hawaiian Islands. And it is considered off map, as no tours go there or are written about going there. It also was like, very few people know the location, and then it proceeds to like give directions on some of the sites. We're not going to get into that because I'm like, I think it's supposed to be a hidden location. But anyway, it's in a cavernous area with lots of holes that are half submerged along the coast of the Pacific Ocean. So west side of the island, for anyone, they did say that part.
So wait, half submerged as in like horizontally?
Kinda.
Okay.
So outside of, I'll get into it, I promise. Outside of the entrance to this Mermaid's Cave are plaques that can be found in memory of those who died inside.
Oh.
Now, I didn't find a ton of stories about this, but I also don't know how far back that goes. So the entrance, to kind of answer your question, is a hole that you have to jump down into and then you jump down into or onto a secret shoreline during low tide.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is there's no great way to climb out. You either have to have like a fuck ton of upper body strength or bring a ladder.
Gee.
Nightmare. Now my brain's like, just wait till high tide.
Oh no.
But don't worry. Well, do worry. If you do that, it's actually super dangerous because there are all these other caves that are partially submerged and they can suck you out into the ocean. Horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So don't do that. Risha's chills.
Chills.
It's like claustrophobia, drowning, all of it.
My biggest fear is losing control in water.
Yeah, this is not for you. But if you go during low tide and you bring your ladder and you pay attention to the clock, this beautiful little cave leads to a little indoor grotto, essentially, with its own little shoreline in a cave. It's supposed to be beautiful. Apparently has great acoustics, is something that it talks about a lot. But you need to make sure that you get out before high tide starts. So that was pretty much all that was wrote about that one. You can find it on a couple of different tours. And there are a few other mermaid caves, but that's one you can visit without being dive certified. I don't recommend visiting it.
No.
Because that sounds terrifying. Anything that has plaques to recognize the dead out front, and not because of like an isolated incident.
Right.
Questionable. But I decided to then consult, because I was quite short, so I decided to consult my book, The Mermaid Atlas, Merfolk of the World.
It's so cool.
I love it. And there's a whole chunk on, well, there's like 2 pages, on mermaid homes.
Aww.
So I thought I'd just touch on those really quick. Specifically, they have mermaid caves, mermaid pools, and underwater builders. So we'll go through the 3 categories. Mermaid caves. A sea cave makes a perfect home for a mermaid, even if it's a little less plush than a palace. Morvarin, the mermaid of Zenner, page 12, we'll read about her in a second, was said to live in a sea cave deep under the underwater rocks of the Cornish coast. One day, some sailors dropped their ship's anchors near Morvan's home. The mermaid appeared beside the ship, begging the captain to move on as the anchor was blocking the entrance to her cave and her family was trapped inside. That's all it says about that. And by the way, on page 12, it doesn't talk about that at all. So at some point I will talk about her.
Oh.
And we'll talk about whether or not they actually moved the anchor, I guess.
Gee.
We're going to assume they did. If there's more of a story to it than that, I will cover it.
Yeah.
Mermaid pools. Around the world, there are many mermaid pools said to be home of a particular mermaid. They may be rock pools by the sea, deep river pools, or sometimes a single small lake or pond, such as Mermaid's Pool in the hills of Derbyshire, England. Although it's far from the sea, this pool has strangely salty water. Maybe that's why it makes such a good home for mermaids who live there. It's said that you can see them only once a year on Easter Sunday by looking into this pool as the sun rises. And then underwater builders. In Russian lakes and rivers and deep mill ponds, you'll find far from pleasant Vodyanoi, Vodyanoi. They look like grumpy old men with long hair and beard, frog-like eyes, and black and scaly fishtails covered in slime and algae.
Ew.
Deep under the water, how'd I say it? Vodyanoi?
Sure.
Yep. Build themselves houses from old logs or even better, sunken boats. If you swim too close to a home, they will drag you down to join them and keep you as a slave.
Gee.
What I'm learning is don't go in mermaids' homes. Just don't fuck with them. A little bit about the mermaid of Zenner that I alluded to earlier. It's a quick little paragraph. It's cute. I like this story. In the village church in Zenner, Cornwall, there's an ancient mermaid chair carved with fish and a mermaid. It's said to celebrate the time when the Cornish mermaid Morvarin fell in love with a local man, Matthew Trewhella, Trewhella. After hearing his beautiful singing in church, disguised as a lady in a long dress, the mermaid went to church and smiled at Matthew, who fell in love with her. He followed her into the sea, where he became her husband and lived with her afterwards.
Aww.
I'm assuming he and his kids were the ones trapped in that cave, though, and they don't allude to the rest of the story. But yeah, that's just a little bit that I have on Mermaid Homes.
She disguised herself with a dress. So did she walk?
I don't know. Thank you, though, because that's where my brain went to. Because, yeah, she described herself in a long dress, which alludes to that she didn't change into legs. Like, this wasn't an aerial situation. So could she just, like, levitate? Did she just flop?
That's weird.
Like, did she flop all the way to church?
Or did she, like, say, oh, I'm a cripple?
But how did she get, like, to church?
She asked for help.
Right, like, I get the church must have been close so she could hear his singing. But, like, how'd you get from shore into the church? Even if it's, like, on the shore, right? Like...
And she got into the church?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so.
Because I'm like, if the church was, like, right up against the shore...
Disguised as a lady in a long dress, the mermaid went to the church and smiled at Matthew. So at least close.
Because I'm like, she could maybe have thrown a dress on and, like, hopped up on a rock aerial style.
Right.
Close to the church?
I don't know. If there's more about her, I'll do a little looking. And if there's more about her, maybe we'll do a, like, separate episode about her. Yeah. But if I couldn't tell if there would be or not, and I just frankly ran out of time to look.
That's
so I was
fine.
like, meh.
That was nice. I like that.
A fun little mermaid story.
Yeah.
Maybe just before you go to a mermaid cave, though, like, check the reviews.
Yeah. And I want to see the chair that's all carved.
Yeah. Oh, if I can find that,
nice.
that'll be a good picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all I've got for this week's episode.
Well, cool.
Leave a comment.
Yeah.
Subscribe wherever you listen. And stay thirsty and keep wet.
Cover your necks and watch your tail.
Obscurantism and obfuscation.
Orally observed, gentle listener.
Gentle listener.
Gentle listener.
Gentle listener.
Obviated objects of oblivion.
Obambulating about.
Offered unto you.
Offered unto you.
Offered unto you.
In the Tapestry Radio Network.
TapestryRadio.org.
From our fancy to yours.